What's up, guys? Welcome to the second take. I'm Zach.
And I'm Jonah.
And we are back as promised for our March Madness bracket breakdown. Last year, and our one year since we started this. How did we do last year? I don't really remember.
I didn't do so great. I'm not sure about yourself, but
I think we were relatively decent, though.
No, yeah, I've had worse years.
Yeah, like it wasn't great. It wasn't great for us, but that's because we usually do pretty good with this.
Yeah.
All right, so basically we're gonna do the same thing as last year. Just go through. We're gonna go through the round of 64 first, and then go through the round of 32, and then that'll take us through the games this weekend, and then next week we'll come back for Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games that we'll pick, and keep doing the same thing until the tournament's over. And there's gonna be some games we don't talk a whole lot about, like Villanova, Mount St. Mary's. Mount St. Mary's with a lovely win last night, but is that really gonna translate to beating Villanova? Probably not, so we'll kind of breeze through stuff like that. So speaking of the devil, Jonah and I shockingly both have Villanova advancing in the first round as the overall number one seed in the tournament and the number one seed in the East. So that brings us to the 8-9 matchup in Wisconsin, Virginia Tech.
Yeah, this is a really interesting game. There's I have feelings going both ways in this game because I think we have crapped on Wisconsin a good amount this year, but I certainly think they're better than an 8 seed. And then Virginia Tech is a solid team coming out of one of the best conferences you've ever seen. So this is a really tough matchup to pick right off the bat. I have Wisconsin getting through. I feel like they're gonna they specialize in taking away what you do best. I think they're dramatically underseeded as an 8 here. And I think that Happ and Hayes are probably the best individual players in this game. I know you're not very high on Nigel Hayes, but
yeah, but I would still agree with that.
But yeah, I'm gonna go with Wisconsin in this one. It's not really fair to Virginia Tech because they have to play a team as good as a 9 seed.
Right.
But that's my reasoning there.
Yeah, this game is. I don't know. I started out this year by telling Jonah that I would refuse to pick a Big Ten team in the tournament because that's how bad I thought the Big Ten was. That's coming from a kid that goes to a Big Ten school and has watched every single one of these teams play. But yeah, Virginia Tech is going to have a tough time here. Ethan Happ is going to be the major problem because Zach Leday is pretty much the big man on Virginia Tech, and he's like maybe 6'6" on a good day, and he's fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know. The duo of Hayes and Happ is going to be tough to stop inside. So I think Wisconsin's going to get this one. And like Jonah said, they're going to take you out of what you do best. So I think Wisconsin will move on to face Villanova. But first we're going to keep going down the bracket to the next game, which is the 5 seed Virginia taking on the 12 seed UNC Wilmington.
Yeah, this is another one of those games. This is a lot of people are picking UNC Wilmington here because Virginia is not a team that scores very well. They can struggle. If they're not hitting their open shots, then they're going to have to score like 45 points. It's just going to be one of those games. I'm always wary of games like this where like everybody and their brother is picking the upset, and I kind of want to pump the brakes on that a little bit because Virginia is a team that went 11-7 in a really tough ACC. They beat Louisville twice. They beat UNC. They beat Notre Dame. So UNC Wilmington is obviously one of the better mid-major teams in this tournament. It certainly would not shock me if they won this game. But if anybody can slow down this UNC Wilmington offense, it's this Virginia team. And we were talking about this earlier, but if Virginia can hit their open shots, then they should be able to pull this one out against UNC Wilmington. And I'm going to go with Virginia to win this one. I'm a little higher on them than most people. So.
Yeah, this is one of the many matchups this year, actually, that pretty much faces polar opposites together. Virginia has the number 1 overall defensive efficiency team, and UNC Wilmington has the number 18 offensive efficiency team. Yeah. So Virginia gives up 87 points per 100 possessions, which is disgustingly low for anyone that follows that category. But UNC Wilmington, the reason they're such a popular pick is because they played Duke last year as a 14 or 13 seed. Do you remember?
I think Duke was a 4, so think it was.
Yeah, I think you're right. And they have basically the entire team back, and they played Duke to a 10-point game, and they were actually up by 2 at halftime, which, yes, was terrifying if you were wondering. But, so yeah, it's the same team back. They score the ball really well, and Virginia obviously doesn't let you score very well. Virginia's held North Carolina, who many people think is one of the best offenses college basketball. They held them to, I want to say, 43 points in a season game, which is insane to tell you how good that defense is.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with you here also and go with Virginia. The thing that scares me is I always look for teams that were here last year and like showed a little bit of promise and now they're back. That's always scary to me because like you get that one season under your belt, you understand what the atmosphere is like, what you're going to feel like pregame, like you get all that. Now you just go and take care of your business. And Virginia, while they do have London Parentes and Shayok, they're actually a pretty young team with everybody else that contributes. So it's definitely a scary game. I definitely see why people are picking UNC Wilmington, but there's a lot more upsets that I like later on, and you obviously only have a select few every year, so I think I'm going to go against this one as well. So that brings us... Yeah, go ahead.
Next up, we got the number 4 seed Florida against number 13 East Tennessee State. Do you want to kick off this one?
Yeah, so this is another trendy upset pick. Florida's looked pretty bad recently. They just lost for the 3rd time to Vanderbilt, and they had one of their big kids go down a couple weeks ago, and they haven't really looked the same since. So a lot of people are looking at Eastern Tennessee in this game. The East Tennessee State definitely can score the ball. They play pretty good defense, so there's a lot to like for sure. But I'm going with Florida because of one fact. Florida is like VCU in the fact that they want to speed you up and make you play a messy game. And while they're not as good as VCU is at doing that, they still get the job pretty much accomplished. And East Tennessee State is one of the worst turnover per game teams in the NCAA, coming in at like over 300 out of 347 teams. So that's the main factor for me going with Florida in this game.
Yeah, you have partly convinced me to change my mind in this game. I was with the trendy East Tennessee State pick. I hadn't looked probably deeply enough into the numbers here. Yeah, I mean, I think Florida is... I would be surprised if they get past the first weekend, but because they do have some problems on the inside. Their best big man, John Igbunu, is out for the season. So that could be a problem later on, but it shouldn't be much of a problem against this team. Also, this game is being played in Orlando, so it's a de facto home game for Florida. So I think that they're going to get through this one, which would set them up with a matchup against Virginia that we'll talk about.
And just before I move on to the next one, just because this one made me think of it, one double-digit underdog has moved on to the round of 32 in the last 4 tournaments, and this is one of the double-digit underdogs that a lot of people are liking. So keep that in mind as we go through the rest.
I didn't realize.
Yeah, I promise we'll find one. Don't worry. You actually already have one. You already have one in your bracket, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So next we have the 6 seed SMU playing the winner of tonight's game, Providence or USC.
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of SMU. They have a nice looking record at 30-4, but their best wins are just they've beaten Cincinnati a couple times. They played Michigan and lost by 22, which is like one of their only shots against a really good out of conference team. I like Providence even less, though. I don't think they deserve to be in the tournament. I think their spot should have gone to Syracuse. So if Providence beats USC, then I'll have SMU getting past them there. But if USC wins this game, I'm going to pick USC to win over SMU. They've already beaten SMU this year. USC is probably a little better than the record suggests, even because they were without their best player, Benny Boatwright, for a lot of the season. They've played the good teams in the Pac-12 pretty tough, and they've taken care of business against the rest. So USC is the best of the four playing teams of that, large teams to me, and I think that they have a good shot to beat SMU if they win. But if Providence wins, I'll take SMU.
Yeah, so this is a game that I think is going to blow up a lot of people's brackets early on. I've pretty much heard a consensus of SMU is going to win and they're going to beat Baylor in the next round, or New Mexico State, which we'll get to. And then I've also even heard as much as SMU is going to beat Duke in the Sweet 16 to take on Villanova. And I think that's like 6, 7 steps way too far. I didn't like SMU before the tournament started, and I like SMU even less now. I know they just beat Cincinnati, and I know they look good doing it, but you got to take that for what it's worth, because SMU, while everyone says that their defense is fantastic, which, yes, they play good defense, they have the 27th ranked defensive team in terms of efficiency, giving up 95 points per 100 possessions. That's while facing offenses that rank 137th in offensive efficiency on average. So that's...
Yeah, I mean, even the best other team in their conference is hardly an offensive powerhouse in Cincinnati.
Right, the best team they play pretty much all year, multiple times, scores the same amount of points as Virginia scores. So it's not like they're playing the ACC schedule that Virginia's playing and only giving up 87 points per 100 possessions. Like, that's unreal. SMU's just doing what they're supposed to be doing. And as I said, I believe I said this a couple days ago on the podcast, but I can't trust a team that has Shemi Ojale as their best player and go-to guy in March. Yes, I think he's fantastic. Yes, he's definitely able to score the ball and is a good basketball player. No, I don't trust him to win me a game in March. And yeah, they probably have a little bit more than just him, but I don't know, man. Last year I picked McLaughlin and Benny Boatwright to beat Providence and Chris Dunn, and I thought they were going to give UNC a little run for their money. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see a whole lot of that, but they're back, and I think they're really dangerous. So I'm going with the same thing as you here. I'll take USC if they win tonight. If they don't, I think SMU can beat Providence. So that'll bring us to another matchup I can't stand, which is Baylor as a 3 seed against New Mexico State at 14.
Yeah, this is I've been down on Baylor all season. I would be surprised if they lost to New Mexico State. My mom actually has them in the national championship game, which we're a little dubious of that.
Yes, which means all Baylor fans should rejoice right now because Mrs. Cohen is quite good with brackets.
Yeah, she would have won the massive bracket pool we have in our school our senior year of high school, but then she didn't. But she would have won it. So she's a better bracketologist than we even are some years. So, but
the more you know, the worse off you are.
Yeah, exactly. Baylor has been pretty bad lately. They lost 6 of their last 11.
Yikes.
Which is
not ideal.
After really hot. Yeah, and a 14 seed has beaten a 3 seed in each of the past 4 tournaments, as ESPN tells me, looking at this bracket. So that's a little nugget of information to consider. I think Baylor's probably good enough to get past New Mexico State, but I would be surprised if Baylor gets out of the first weekend.
Yeah, so I mentioned before with Virginia, UNC, Wilmington that we have a lot of matchups with complete opposite teams. This is a matchup with identical teams. Both teams they're not fast basketball teams, they're not slow basketball teams. They play a normal pace, they rebound the crap out of the ball, they have decent offenses, they have decent defenses. They literally play identical basketball, which generally is bad for a favorite. And I always, if you remember last year, I always tend to pick against teams that are bad in March. And obviously last year that bit me in the butt with Nova because they're always bad in March and they went on quite the run. But Baylor is one of those teams I always look for because so many times. When was the last time that Baylor wasn't like a top 4 seed that you can remember?
I don't know. They've gotten high seeds pretty much every year, but they're another team that obviously teams are bad in March until they're not.
Right,
last year.
which is quite possible this year, but I can't really remember them ever being a low seed, but I also can't really remember them making a run ever. Like, they're always the one that really ends up breaking people's brackets. So for that reason, I'm going New Mexico State, because I think Baylor relies a lot on their ability to rebound the ball and just physically outmatch other people, and I don't think that New Mexico State's going to be worried at all about that.
Yeah, I mean, it won't bust my bracket too much if Baylor loses, because I will have them losing the next game either way. But
right, but then the weird thing that could happen is then you'd be seeing an 11 seed against a 14 seed, and where do you go from there?
Right, yeah, no, that's true.
So next one we're going to go to is South Carolina Marquette, which I have a serious problem with. I don't enjoy that this game is going to be played in South Carolina, where Duke is also going to be playing, and North Carolina, because South Carolina basically gets a home court advantage against Marquette. And if they win, they play Duke at home also, and guess who plays just before them? Would be North Carolina, which means Duke would basically be a true road game against South Carolina.
Yeah, you're going to be lots of people rooting against Duke in that building.
Yes, and many of them don't even know a player on South Carolina, if you understand what I'm saying there.
Yeah. I think that's probably fair.
But anyways, this is another matchup of pretty much polar opposites. Marquette is one of the best offensive teams in the country. South Carolina is one of the best defensive teams in the country. This is basically Virginia against UNCW, just with a slightly worse offense and a slightly worse defense. Marquette can really shoot the ball. They pretty much rely on the three-point line and chucking a lot of threes up there. South Carolina relies on Sindarius Thornwell, and, well, why wouldn't you after watching him play? But they've hit a really low point in their season here recently. They've really struggled after starting out pretty hot. This is also a matchup of two really good, probably highly underrated coaches in Frank Martin and Steve Wojciechowski. I am going to give the edge to Marquette, even though they're playing almost a true road game here, just because I like the fact that they can shoot the ball a lot, and I like their coach just a little bit better for obvious reasons.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like Marquette in this game as well. I mean, I think South Carolina is a team that is on the wrong trajectory, and it's a team that I didn't think was that great even before. And Marquette is, Marquette's not a great defensive team, but South Carolina is not a team that's exactly gonna hurt you too much if you're not great on defense. So I got Marquette in this game, but yeah, I don't know. I don't feel that strongly about this one, honestly.
Yeah, this is a toss-up, and hopefully it doesn't matter, because hopefully Duke can beat him in the second round, but it's not 7-10 matchups and 8-9 matchups aren't always terrible to lose, because generally you're expecting them to lose in the next game anyways, so if you're struggling with these, it's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
Alright, so we'll get to Duke-Troy now, the 2-15 matchup in the East to round it out. There's not a whole lot to talk about. We'll probably breeze through this just like the rest of the more obvious ones. Duke's going to be a heavy favorite. Troy's athletic. They can play a little bit. They beat USC this year. Or almost beat USC this year, sorry. But, yeah, Duke should handle this one pretty easily. You want to say anything about that?
Nope.
Alright, good. I was worried. So we're going to continue down the left-hand side of the bracket if you're following along. To the 1-16 of Gonzaga, South Dakota State in the West. I think South Dakota State is, I think they deserve a little bit of a higher seed because they were a good team last year. That Maryland had to play. I believe they were a 12 seed, but they're good. Not good enough to knock off Gonzaga, however, so we have Gonzaga advancing. Jonah and I are not going to be the ones to call a 16 over a 1 if you're listening solely for that purpose. Sorry.
Yeah.
So we'll go to the 8-9 matchup, Northwestern against Vanderbilt.
Yeah, this is an interesting matchup. Obviously, Northwestern has gotten a lot of attention this year because it seems like half the college basketball media are Northwestern grads.
Yeah. Or they're Syracuse grads, and they're upset that they're not in the tournament.
Right. So we're hearing a lot about those two teams. But this is definitely an exciting year for Northwestern. They've never made the NCAA tournament before. This is their first year there. This is a game that I've had mixed feelings about. Northwestern, they're from two conferences that I don't have super high opinions of. But something has to give, obviously, here. I like Northwestern in this game. Vanderbilt does have some quality wins, but they also have a bunch of losses. That's, of course, partly because they scheduled some tough games, but I like Northwestern in this one just because I liked what I've seen from them in the last few games that they've played. They had a good performance against Purdue, but didn't pull it off, and then had a pretty decent run in the Big Ten tournament with a nice win over Maryland. So I like Northwestern in this one. It's part of my policy of not picking SEC teams if I can possibly avoid it. You might have to...
Yeah, I have the opposite policy.
Yeah.
So...
You got Vanderbilt?
Yeah, I don't know if you looked at any of their average numbers, but it's kind of scary how close these teams are in terms of ratings. So Vandy averages 112.3 points per 100 possessions. Northwestern averages 111.2. Defensively, Northwestern gives up 95.7. Vanderbilt gives up 96.1. And their tempo numbers are identical. So they literally play the exact same style of basketball. Which tells me that it's going to come down to, one, probably coaching, and two, just flat out who has the more talented players. I would give the edge to Vanderbilt in terms of more talented players, just by a little bit, because I don't think Northwestern can deal with Luke Cornett. And I would give the edge in coaching to Chris Collins, being that, obvious reasons again, but also I don't think a lot of people really enjoy playing for Kevin Stallings. I think 3 players have actually already transferred since the SEC tournament ended. So obviously there's a little bit of a disconnect, I'd say. But I don't even know why I just said Kevin Stallings. He's not even the coach there. But anyways, I think I'm going to go with Vanderbilt, even though I do like Northwestern a lot, just like you. But yeah, I'm going to go with Vandy. So next we have the 5-12 matchup of Notre Dame against Princeton.
Yeah, this is I saw Princeton in person this year. This is the one team in the tournament that I did watch play this year.
Dartmouth was upset in the first round.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it's not an upset when Dartmouth loses. But, yeah, Princeton went undefeated in Ivy League play this year. They didn't play very well in the one game that I saw them in. We actually almost beat them, which is, an amazing achievement for us to almost beat anyone, for a team that's good. So I was low on Princeton going into the Ivy League tournament, but they had a gutty performance against Penn, and they beat Yale pretty solidly. This, I think they're a decent team. The Ivy League champ always plays well in the first round. They always at least put up a good fight against whoever they play. But I think Notre Dame's underseeded, and I don't think this is a good matchup for Princeton anyway, because Notre Dame's a team that does not beat themselves. They have a solid core of guys that they play. They have a pretty small but pretty solid rotation. Princeton's not going to be able to beat them with size, so it just doesn't feel like a good matchup for Princeton to me, even though I do think they're a pretty solid team. So I'm going to go with Notre Dame.
I believe Notre Dame lost to Yale last year. Is that correct, in the first round?
No, Yale beat Baylor last year.
Okay, I was wondering who Yale beat. But, yeah, like you said, Ivy League teams are generally pretty good. However, I think that Notre Dame is really good. I told Jonah when they were playing Duke in the ACC tournament that I think Notre Dame is Final Four good if Zach August was still there. They just lack a little bit of size inside. Bonzie Colson's phenomenal, especially against Duke. But having a guy that's 6'7", 6'6", as your pretty much only your only big guy, that's a problem. But that doesn't mean they're going to struggle with Princeton at all. I think they're going to get this one pretty easily. And I also think they're underseeded, like you said.
Yeah. So next up, we got the 4-13 matchup. West Virginia, the 4 seed against Bucknell, the 13 seed. What are your thoughts on this one?
West Virginia is also a team that scares me. So the reason I keep talking about Big 12 teams that scare me is because there hasn't been a Big 12 team that reached the Final Four since 2008. Can you believe that?
Wow. Kansas hasn't made it since 2008?
Right.
That explains why my brackets are bad.
Because they're always a 1 seed, so God forbid.
Yeah.
But I don't know. This is another contrast in styles where Bucknell kind of plays like you'd expect, kind of like Princeton actually. They like to control the ball, control the game. They shoot it pretty well. Don't play fantastic defense, but it's not bad defense. But they're just going up against a different beast in West Virginia. So I have West Virginia in this one.
Yeah, I think Bucknell is going to have trouble dealing with the amount of turnovers that West Virginia can create. I'm not a huge fan of this West Virginia team. They're not much of an offensive team, but I don't think that should be a big problem in this game. So I'm going to have West Virginia advancing out of this one as well, which brings us to Zach's own Maryland Terrapins, number 6 seed against the 11 seed Xavier.
The most overseeded team in the tournament, in my opinion.
Which one?
Maryland. They should not be a 6 seed. If Wisconsin's an 8, there's no way Maryland's a 6.
Oh yeah, there's no ration. They should have swapped spots in the bracket.
Yeah, which I don't know. I mean, I like being a 6 because I think they can beat Xavier. It's like the one team in the field I feel decent about being able to beat, since Edmund Sumner is going to be sitting on the sideline watching it.
Yep.
But yeah, so Maryland's a very cold team right now, coming off a pretty bad loss to Northwestern. Not that Northwestern's bad, just the way that Maryland played was pretty bad. And Xavier's banged up. They're playing well though. Trevin Bluett's playing extremely well. This is a game I've gone back and forth on a lot. This is a game I think that's going to be one of the closer, more difficult to pick games of the first weekend. But I have to go with Xavier, just from what I've seen from Maryland every single game I've gone to and watched.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Maryland. This is like the classic Zach always down in the thing. Maryland obviously does not look great right now. They started really hot and closed pretty weak. But I think they should have enough to beat a Xavier team that has looked even worse lately than Maryland has. Since losing their best player, Edmund Sumner. So I think Maryland will have enough to get past Xavier, but this is a pretty weak first-round matchup to me. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Maryland, but that doesn't mean I think super highly of them.
That game is also in Orlando, Florida, which is where the next game takes place between the 3 and the 14, which is Florida State and Florida Gulf Coast. Pretty interesting there. A game played in Orlando, Florida, between Florida State and Florida Gulf Coast. So Florida State is really bad at home, as we've documented many times. I mean, on the road, as we've documented many times. This isn't necessarily on the road, but it's not home either. And Florida Gulf Coast, I think, is going to have a good amount of support in Orlando. This isn't the Dunk City team that we're used to from a couple years ago, but this is a really good basketball team. They beat a North Florida team I was really high on all year long to get here. And I don't know. I don't like anything about Florida State other than Jonathan Isaac, really. That kid plays well every single game and brings it every single game. But this is one of my big upsets that I'm going to pick, and I'm going to go with Florida Gulf Coast.
You got 2 3 seeds going down already.
Yep, I do. I know. It's not a good thing.
I'm gonna go with Florida State here. Florida Gulf Coast. This is the closest I came to picking a 14 seed. I think they're definitely the best 14 seed. They played tough games against Michigan State and against Baylor. So those are good results for them. I think Florida State's going to have enough talent to win this game. They're not going to have to travel far, so they won't have as much of like the road yips that we're used to seeing from
Right.
them. And they did go 6-4 against top 25 teams this year. They went 12-6 and were the second place finishers in a really tough ACC. So I think they'll have enough to get through this game. This is a stretch we were talking about before we started. This is a little spot in the bracket that I find pretty weak. But yeah, I'm going with higher seeds advancing in both of those games.
Yep. So next is the 7-10 matchup, St. Mary's VCU. This is another contrast in styles. VCU speeds you up. St. Mary's slows you down. St. Mary's, they both play fantastic defense. So this will probably be a lower scoring game, like mid-50s to low 60s. And it seems like it's the type of game that's going to be whoever breaks first. I tend to go with the team that speeds you up because it means you have to play at a different style. However, for this game, I'm going with St. Mary's just because I think VCU struggles to score at times, and St. Mary's defense is very, very, very good. So that's going to be a little bit of a problem for VCU.
I'm going to go with VCU in this one. I think St. Mary's is okay. I haven't been super high on them this year. I'd like to see evidence from them that they can beat a really good team before I pick them to move on. I think that St. Mary's is going to have trouble with a team that's as athletic as VCU because it's not exactly the St. Mary's calling card. So I like VCU in this one. I think their pressure is going to be able to get to St. Mary's. St. Mary's has guards that can take care of the ball pretty well, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to run from this VCU press for a whole game. So I'm going to go with VCU in this one.
And then we both have Arizona advancing over North Dakota. So which brings us to the Midwest. We also have Kansas advancing over the winner of the game happening right now between NC Central and UC Davis, which brings us to the 8-9 matchup of Miami against Michigan State.
This was the first round matchup that I agonized the longest about before picking. There's like pros and cons like about both of these teams. In general, I like Miami better, and I'm picking Miami. But it hurt my soul to pick against Tom Izzo in March. So like, all apologies to him. I'm not insulting his coaching skill at all, but I think Miami's going to have enough to get through this game. This isn't the Michigan State's team that we're kind of used to seeing in March. This isn't the caliber of team that Tom Izzo usually has, and I think Jim Larrañaga is a pretty great coach himself. Miami team, again, is the team I've been coming back to, but they had a winning record in an extremely tough ACC where Michigan State had the same conference record in a very strange Big Ten, let's say. I don't know. So yeah, Miami's not deep, but they are a really great defensive team. And they have guys who can come up with big games themselves too, between Reed, Jaquan Newton, Bruce Brown. There's a lot of talent on this team that can match up with some of the talent Michigan State has, so I'm going to go with Miami in this one.
Yeah, 100% agree with everything you just said. Michigan State, having seen them in person, Miles Bridges and Nick Ward are flat-out superstars. Like, two of the better players I've seen all year long in person, which isn't saying a ton because Big Ten's not that great with talent, but those two are absolute studs. The thing that separates Miami from Michigan State for me is Miami's extremely athletic, and Michigan State really hangs their hat on Miles Bridges just being more athletic and physically just a freak compared to whoever they play. Miami has the guys that are just as athletic or just as freakish. And yeah, Jim Larrañaga and Tom Izzo is like a wash to me. Both great coaches. But I'm going to give the edge to Miami, a team that held Duke to 50 and beat them. I think they held UNC to something in the 50s as well, and I think they beat them as well too. So a really good defensive team. And if you're catching the theme, Jonah and I like the ACC, obviously, but also really like the ACC over Big Ten schools.
Yep.
So that gets us to the weird 5-12 matchup of Iowa State, Nevada, where fives are. It's actually, statistically, it's been a coin flip between who wins in 5-12 matchups. It's a 50-50 shot. So this is the Iowa State team that is driven by Monte Morris, and Deontay Burton is also really good, and they have some shooters around them. So it's definitely a good team. They've definitely had more talent in the past, but still a good team. This is a Nevada team that I actually am really high on. Cameron Oliver is a really good sophomore forward for Nevada. He's been averaging something like 22 and 12 over the last month. He's a freak that is really hitting a high note at the right time. And they have two fantastic guards. One's a sophomore, one's a senior, that really know how to play. They can really score. So I think they can hang with Iowa State in that aspect. And Iowa State's another turning team that scares me because they often lose pretty early, as Jonah and his brackets know all too well.
Yeah. Yeah. So yet again, surprise, surprise, I am high on Iowa State. I don't know if they would have beaten Kansas if they had had to face them in the Big 12 tournament, but I really do like what I saw from them during the tournament. These are two teams that are very good shooting teams, which I think will make this a pretty high-scoring game. Iowa State might have some trouble inside because they don't have really a solid big man. That's a problem that Iowa State has often had. I'm not picking Iowa State to go to the Elite Eight this year. Finally, I'm not.
He was going to until he looked it over one more time.
I was going to until I came to my senses a little bit. But I do like this Iowa State team quite a bit, and I think they're going to have enough to beat Nevada, although I do think Nevada is a very solid 12 seed. I think Iowa State has the edge here.
So that brings us to our 4-13 with Purdue and Vermont. Another area of the bracket I don't like because I think it can be a spot for an explosion to happen. Purdue is another tournament team that rarely shows up, especially when everyone's betting on them. Vermont, however, I'll be honest, I only watched one game of Vermont's this year, and it was against UAlbany in the America East Final, and I was really not that impressed. I was actually more so impressed with UAlbany. Vermont has a freshman that can really play, but he's 6'5", probably, if he's lucky, starting power forward. So best of luck to you trying to stop Caleb Swanigan from getting a freaking 40-20 game. So that makes me pick Purdue pretty much right there.
Yeah, I'm taking Purdue in this game. I think if Vermont had run into the right matchup, they would have had a chance. Like if they had run into maybe even Iowa State, I think they'd have a chance because they match up better with them. But Vermont hasn't looked good in the games they've played against our teams this year. And even forget about Swanigan, there's nobody in Vermont's lineup who's over 6'8", and Isaac Haas is 7'2". So I would look for a lot of baby hooks from Isaac Haas in this game, and I think Purdue's gonna get out of the first round this year.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
Watch, that'll be the only 13 seed that beats a 4. I'll bet you a quarter on that one.
Oh, for sure. Now that we've predicted.
So that brings us to a 6-11 matchup where I would actually have the seeds reversed, but I am so incredibly high on Rhode Island. I think I'm in the sky. So the 6 is Creighton, the 11 is Rhode Island. I told Jonah that Rhode Island should make the tournament even if they don't win the A10. By their seeding, it doesn't look like that would have happened. But they're finally healthy. They're an experienced team. They play phenomenal defense. Yeah. They started the season 21st, I think. Lost to Duke, which dropped them out of the top 25. But they're a very good team. And they weren't even healthy to start the year when they were that high. They're a really good team, a lot of talent. And this is my Cinderella this year. So I will save more analysis on them for later on. But yes, I like Rhode Island a ton. Also,
Yeah,
the Hurley family is involved, so another reason.
Yeah. The spread for this game is a pick 'em, so that shows you where.
Which I actually think
Vegas.
is incorrect. I think Rhode Island should be favored.
Yeah, I mean Creighton. If Creighton still had Maurice Watson, then Creighton would probably be seeded higher, and we wouldn't be having this conversation at all.
Yeah.
Creighton getting some like residual effect. They did get to the Big East tournament final, but they were handled pretty easily by Villanova. Rhode Island's a good team. This was the easiest upset I picked as well. I'm not quite as high on Rhode Island as you are, but I am pretty confident picking them to beat Creighton.
Yep. So then we go to the 3-14, which is Oregon, Iona. Two really fast-paced teams that like to get a ton of shots up. Really good offenses, but Oregon's a little bit better defensively, and obviously they're better overall at talent and everything. So I think Oregon's going to get this one.
Yeah, me too.
You good with that one?
Yeah. We'll talk about Oregon a little more in the second round.
All right. So Michigan, Oklahoma State is the 7-10 matchup. So Jonah's really high on Michigan, and I'm not.
Yeah. Go blue.
Yeah. So go ahead, have at it.
So Michigan, full disclosure, my mom went to Michigan. I'm a Michigan athletic supporter in general. But this, obviously people have concerns about Michigan. They are on a run lately, so this might be kind of a sucker bet to be high on Michigan. But I do think that they'll have enough to beat Oklahoma State. I'm not big on Oklahoma State. They played 10 games against ranked teams and only won once, which was a win over West Virginia. Michigan looks like it has the goods right now. They have mobile big men and a solid pair of senior guards in Zach Irvin and Derek Walton Jr. So even if Walton does not turn into Kemba Walker, as you were talking about earlier, I do think that Michigan will have enough to win this game anyway.
I'll give you one stat as to why I'm picking Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is the number 1 overall offensive efficiency team, and Michigan's number 5, so they're not that far apart. The difference is Oklahoma State is the number 1 offensive efficiency team while playing an average of the highest ranked defensive efficiency teams. So the average defensive efficiency teams that they play scores a 97.6 in the KenPom ratings. And Michigan averages playing a number 18 defensive efficiency team. So Oklahoma State has the best offensive efficiency against the best possible defensive teams of anyone in the country. So that gives the edge to Oklahoma State in my book. And then they're both relatively even defensively.
I just feel like Oklahoma State will have trouble guarding Michigan's big guys, I guess.
Yeah, no, and I feel the same way, but I think it's going to be a high 80s type of game that I think Juwan Evans would thrive in that. So next is Louisville, Jacksonville State, the 2-15 matchup. This is Jacksonville State's first tournament, and let's just say it's not Louisville's first tournament, so that probably gives the edge to Louisville if I had to guess.
Yeah.
So now we go to the South. UNC, which is Jonah's part-time favorite team. Just kidding. Is playing.
Basketball. Atheist.
Is playing. The ceiling is the roof. University is playing Texas Southern, and I think Texas Southern has the best shot at beating a 1 seed this year. But let's just not say that's going to happen because UNC shouldn't have too big of a problem there. Mm-hmm. Which brings us to another one of Jonah's favorite teams this year. Seton Hall as the 9 seed taking on Arkansas from the SEC, Jonah's favorite conference.
Yeah, this couldn't be an easier 8-9 pick for me.
You know what that means, right?
Yeah, it means I'm definitely going to lose it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like Seton Hall a lot. I love how they look lately. They gave Villanova a really tough game in the Big East tournament. I really like Delgado and Rodriguez, 2 of Seton Hall's best players. I don't really think Arkansas is a very good basketball team. They were fine in a crappy SEC, which, you can only beat who you play, so
Sure.
I guess that's fine, but they didn't beat Florida, they didn't beat Kentucky, they got killed by Oklahoma State, they lost by a bunch to Minnesota. Like, they don't really have results that I can look at and say, this is a really great basketball team. Seton Hall has a good number of wins against tournament teams. This is a pretty easy call for me to go with Seton Hall.
Yeah, I tried to look at this game deeply and find a way to pick Arkansas, and really the farther I looked, the harder it became. I don't necessarily like Seton Hall a ton, but they were here last year. If Isaiah Whitehead stays, this is an Elite Eight type of talent level, at least. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Seton Hall here, too. A lot of it is what Jonah talked me into, to be completely honest, but they definitely have more talent, and they didn't play in the SEC, so both of those factors are heavily in their favor.
Yep.
So we'll go to the 5-12, probably the most trendy upset pick that I've seen this March, which is Middle Tennessee State as the 12 seed taking on Minnesota as the 5 seed.
Yeah, so I think Minnesota is overseeded. It's the Big Ten. Like, the way they seeded the Big Ten makes no sense to me. Like, this 5 in Maryland is a 6, yet Wisconsin is an 8. Like, we're not even huge fans of Wisconsin, and we think that's pretty crazy. And to add to that, like, Minnesota lost one of its best players in Akeem Springs.
Huge loss.
This is games that I cautioned about earlier, like the upset everyone's picking. I'm always a little bit wary of taking that. But at the same time, I think Middle Tennessee is a legitimately good team. I think if you're going to pick some upsets, this is a really prime spot to do it. I think Minnesota has some issues. And like, they've been good lately, but they're not that far removed from being not very good. And Middle Tennessee has been solid all year, so I'm going to go with them in this one.
Yeah, I'm going Middle Tennessee State also. This is the 15 seed that beat Michigan State last year, and it's literally the identical roster plus like one role player. So they didn't lose anything. They're still just as good, I think, probably even better. And they're playing a much worse team in Minnesota than Michigan State was last year. So
yeah,
I like Middle Tennessee State a lot in this game. And then we'll go to the 4-13 matchup between Butler and Winthrop, which is another upset Jonah and I like. And Winthrop, who's a team that likes to push the ball, likes to shoot a lot of threes, and has a 5'7" wonder boy in Keon Johnson that I promise you everyone will know his name by... What time do they play? They play tomorrow, right?
1:30 tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah, so everyone will know his name by like 3 o'clock, easy.
I like the fact that he's shorter than me and is really good, so it still gives me some hope.
Yeah, there was a 5'5" kid on St. Mary's last night that put up 25. I don't know if you saw that, but...
I know, yeah.
So you have a lot of hope. Don't worry. Keep working.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you want to say anything about that one?
No, I mean, I think you pretty much summed it up. Winthrop likes to push the ball. Butler hates teams that do that.
Yes.
I think Butler is over as a 4 anyway, so...
That I forgot to say that. Butler lost twice to Creighton, and Winthrop pretty much plays the exact same style as Creighton. So that's most of the reason. However, a lot of people have been picking Butler to upset UNC, which makes me really nervous because I'm either going to hit a home run with Winthrop or I'm going to strike out completely.
Well, welcome to March Madness.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I probably could have said that about every other game I picked so far.
Yep.
So now we have the 6-11 matchup between Cincinnati and Kansas State. Kansas State just dropped 95 spot on the worst defensive performance I've ever seen in my life with Wake Forest.
Yeah.
Please don't think that 95 points means they're going to score a lot against Cincinnati, because they probably won't even get half of that.
Yeah, I think they might not. The Cincinnati defense is great every single year. That's no different this year. This is an extremely physical team. Kansas State is going to run into a lot more resistance than they did last night. So I think Cincinnati will win this game. I know you're not very high on them, but I think that you agree with that.
Yeah, I definitely like Cincinnati in this game. I don't know, that the defense is what separates them for me, at least by a lot. Kansas State's not a bad basketball team, but I don't know, they didn't get tested at all last night.
No.
So next we have UC. Yeah, go ahead.
That one.
What'd you say?
Unless you Kent State.
Well, I mean, this couldn't be a worse matchup for Kent State, so no, I don't have Kent State.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the 7-10 of Wichita State, Dayton. Dayton is the 7, Wichita State's the 10.
Yeah, these are two of the best coached mid-major teams on offer. I like Wichita State in this one. I'm a little afraid that that's just putting me on a bandwagon because people have heard of Wichita State and just consider them to be good. But Wichita State is hot right now. They've won 15 straight coming into the tournament. Only one of those wins was by less than 15 points. This is a deep, balanced roster. They're a great three-point shooting team. Obviously well coached with Greg Marshall, who people have been trying to hire away for years, and for good reason. So this Dayton team's good, but they're coming in on a 2-game losing streak. These are teams that are kind of trending in opposite directions right now, so I do think this Dayton team is pretty good, but I think that Wichita's going to come through.
Yeah, this is the first year in my life I haven't picked Dayton in the NCAA tournament, and I'm really upset about it, but they couldn't have had a worse matchup, really. They're running into a buzzsaw that is Wichita State. That is the most underseeded team I think I've ever seen in NCAA tournament history. I don't care who they played. They ran through their conference tournament by winning their games by more than 18 points every single night. That's against teams that they've played twice in a season. They're playing them for a third time. They're playing them for their season, because if the team loses that they're playing, their season's over. So that's added bonus. They're playing to ruin Wichita State's season, and they blow them out of the water every single time. And then they blow out Illinois State, who people wanted to make the argument could have been a tournament team. But Wichita State beat them by 30 one time, and then they also smoked them in the conference championship. So
yeah,
I mean they're very good.
My theory is that the committee just wanted to set up the Kentucky rematch, and they were trying to whatever had to be done to make that happen. Which leads us to Kentucky. I assume we both have them beating the Norse of Northern Kentucky.
Yes, Northern Kentucky's first year in the tournament. Best of luck to them. I hope they blow out John Calipari, but don't count on it.
You know what bothers me a little bit, just a quick aside here. The Norse implies that there's some kind of northern snow fighting.
But it's Kentucky.
It's just because you're from the north of Kentucky doesn't mean you're Northern. I just want to make that clear.
Can I say something about the education level in Kentucky, or that be frowned upon?
Yeah, well,
I guess I've already said enough.
That explains a lot of things about several teams that play in that state. But
all right, so now we're going to go through the second round relatively quickly, since we've already given you the rundown on all the teams that are going to win the first round. At this point, we obviously expect our brackets to be perfect, therefore it shouldn't be too hard to get through this. So, Jonah and I both have Villanova against Wisconsin in this first round, and I believe we're both going to have Villanova advancing.
Yeah, it sucks for Wisconsin, that they don't get an easier matchup than this. Again, I think they're very underseeded, but I think Villanova's going to have the goods to win that one.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people take Wisconsin as an upset in this, to be honest.
And my mom.
Okay.
Watch out for that.
Okay, so definitely keep note of that, but again, I don't necessarily agree, just like our Baylor pick, but that's okay. We'll see what happens. If she wins, more power to her, but my bracket will be ripped up very fast if she wins. Yeah, I'm not going to bet against Villanova until they meet my squad in the Elite Eight. But I do think that would be a very good game, and I don't think Villanova is necessarily happy to face Wisconsin in the second round.
Oh, I would guess neither of those teams is happy at all with that. But.
Right. So then we also both have Virginia and Florida in the 4-5 matchup. Who are you going with here?
I'm going with Virginia in this one. I am relatively high in Virginia, but their past tournament failures aside, and I'm pretty low in Florida. I was pretty close to having them lose in the first round. So I'm going to take Virginia in this one, but this is another section of the bracket that I don't love a lot. So
Virginia's only tournament failures is the fact that they get to the Elite Eight every year and can't make it to the Final Four. So
right, exactly. I don't usually have a problem with a Florida team that I don't think is very good.
That's down, yeah. I also think Virginia will get this one. Yeah, that's gonna be an interesting game. They both like to play a whole lot of defense. One team pushes the pace, the other one slows it down. I don't know. It would be a fun game to watch. So hopefully we get to see that one. But the next one we have is kind of a mismatch. We tentatively have I have USC against New Mexico State. Wow. Jonah has USC against Baylor. And we reserve the right to switch that to SMU if Providence wins tonight. But I'm going to have USC advance against New Mexico State just because of the duo of of McLaughlin and Benny Boatwright. But if SMU wins, I will have them advance as well.
Yeah, I think USC is a bad matchup for Baylor, who I have in this game, and so I'm going to have USC getting to the Sweet 16, another Sweet 16 appearance for Andy Enfield, former Florida Gulf State coach.
Yep, he's killing it. He deserves a raise, in my opinion. You're welcome.
Great bet.
Yeah. All right, so next we both have Marquette Duke, right?
Yeah.
So I have Duke in this one. Duke is actually, I couldn't believe this when I saw it, but they're the 5th best team in 3-point field goal defense. Would have never thought that in my life, but I guess it's because they get blown by on the drive every time anyway, so nobody has to shoot any threes. I just said that out loud. But yeah, I have Duke in this one.
Yeah, me too. In a battle between Coach K and another former assistant.
Yes.
It can happen like several times a year.
The loser has to write the winner's coach's name on the chalkboard 1,000 times.
Yeah, that sounds like, well, yeah, that's going to be difficult for them, I guess.
Is that a cruel and unusual punishment by any chance?
Well, I'm used to spelling Coach K's name. I'm not used to spelling Woj's. So.
No, even Woj isn't used to spelling his own name, so.
Probably just writes Woj.
Yeah, exactly. Or he just says, "Give me my money, thank you."
Yeah.
So next we'll go into the West. We have I have Gonzaga against Vanderbilt. Jonah has Gonzaga against Northwestern. I have Gonzaga advancing. This is the best Gonzaga team I can remember, especially for a tournament time. They're definitely built for March, I think, this year.
Yeah, I don't think Gonzaga would have much of a problem with either of those teams. I have them advancing also.
So then we have Notre Dame against West Virginia, a real clash of styles here.
Yeah, West Virginia is the higher seed, but I think Notre Dame is the much better team.
100% agree.
Yeah, I mean, just what I've seen from Notre Dame recently is a lot better than what I've seen from West Virginia recently. I think that Bob Huggins' team is going to have trouble scoring against Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame has the experience. They're a very intelligent team that is required to break West Virginia's press, and so I'm going to go with Notre Dame in this one.
Yeah, I think you follow John Rothstein on Twitter, but he always says betting against Mike Bray's like betting against Christian Bale in a Batman movie.
Yeah, that's one of his 90 catchphrases that he repeatedly.
Yeah, so that pretty much hits the nail on the head. I don't see Matt Farrell turning the ball over against his press. I don't even see him turning it over one time, let alone multiple times. And you hit the nail on the head. They're just more intelligent, better team, better coached, and I got them advancing for sure. Which sets up a really interesting matchup against Gonzaga, but we'll get to that hopefully next week. So then Jonah has Maryland against Florida State. I have Xavier against Florida Gulf Coast. I'll just give my quick pitch, then you can give yours. I think Florida Gulf Coast is going to advance in this one. I'm buying into Dunk City Part 2. I don't know. I don't like Maryland or Xavier a whole lot. So really, it's kind of by default, to be completely honest. And of the 4 teams there, Florida Gulf Coast is actually the one I trust the most.
Yeah, it's kind of the same rationale for me. I don't love any of these 4 teams, but I like Florida State the most. They just have a lot of talented players, I guess, to put it pretty simply, so all of them advancing, which would set up a potentially very interesting matchup with an Arizona team that also just has a lot of talented players.
Yeah, lots of length, lots of talent there. So you have VCU, right?
Yes.
You want to give your spiel, or do you just want to say Arizona's going to win?
Yeah, I have Arizona winning. I think VCU is going to struggle to score. I think Arizona has the players necessary to deal with press like VCU's. So I'm going with Arizona.
Yeah, I have Arizona over St. Mary's. More of the same of what Jonah said, just different style of game that's going to be played. And Arizona is actually my second favorite team to win this tournament behind my Duke Blue Devils. So I will be speaking a lot on Arizona for a long time, I do believe, because I think we'll be hearing from them for at least the next few weeks. So that brings us to the Midwest, where we have Kansas against Miami.
This feels a little like a possible trappy game for Kansas. I'm not going to pull the trigger on picking Miami. I think Kansas has enough talent. They should be able to win this game, but don't be at all surprised if Miami wins that.
I feel the same way. I think Kansas is going to be the first 1 seed to lose, and I could very well see Miami getting it done. I will not pick that, but I would not be surprised either. So that brings us to our next matchup, which we have some different things here. I have Nevada, Purdue. Jonah has Iowa State, Purdue, right?
Yeah.
So I have actually Nevada advancing in this game. I'm buying in big time. There's 2 teams I'm buying into hard, and well, I don't really consider Middle Tennessee State because I've been buying into them since last year, but Rhode Island and Nevada are my 2 teams this year. My 2 Cinderellas.
Yeah, I like Iowa State to beat Purdue. Purdue's a perennial tournament underachiever.
Yep.
They do have the size advantage over Iowa State, but this seems like a game that Iowa State could potentially just outscore Purdue, because we've seen Purdue struggle even against teams that don't match up that well with it on paper. And I think Iowa State has shown that it's capable of beating anybody, as evidenced by winning at Kansas, which almost nobody is able to do ever. So I have Iowa State, surprise, surprise, getting into the Sweet 16.
Which would set up, what, the 3rd, 4th matchup with Kansas? 3rd, I think? 3rd.
3rd, yeah.
And they beat them twice already, so... So the next one I have is Rhode Island, Oregon. Jonah has the same thing. If you couldn't tell by what I just said 30 seconds ago, I'm going with Rhode Island because they're my Cinderella. Their glass slipper, I think, is already secure on their foot, and I expect to hear from them for a while as well. So I'm going with Rhode Island over a little bit of a banged up Oregon team. If this bites me in the butt, Oregon will make the Final Four. I can promise you that, because I just picked Rhode Island to beat them.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if Rhode Island won this game either. They're another team I'm pretty high on, but Oregon, despite losing Boucher, I don't think that's going to be a huge problem against Rhode Island specifically. And so I'm going to go with Oregon in this one. This seems like the most balanced Oregon team that Dana Altman has had. I'm pretty high on this team in general. They've beaten Arizona. They have beaten UCLA. So and their worst losses came very early in the season. So it's a team that's looking pretty good right now despite the injuries. So I'm going to go with Oregon.
And their worst losses came without Dylan Brooks, who, disclaimer, I can't stand, but he is the most clutch player in the NCAA, so...
Yeah, I know you're not a fan.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll have more time to discuss that later on. So next, I have Oklahoma State, Louisville. Jonah has Michigan, Louisville. I have Louisville advancing. I am fond of Louisville in my Final Four this year, it seems like. Can't really get away from that, even though I really would like to. I think Louisville is pretty good. I think Donovan Mitchell is the type of kid that can get them hot and get them on a run. And I'm going with Louisville.
Yeah, I'm going with Michigan here. This is an upset that I like. As we said before, I'm very high on this Michigan team. I haven't been very high on Louisville throughout this season. They're a good rebounding team that's going to be able to hang with Michigan's big guys, I think. But I think that Michigan matches up player for player with them as well as any team that Louisville's going to see, at least until the Elite Eight. So I like Michigan to advance in this one. And you could talk me into having them in the Elite Eight. I'll just say that.
I don't think I really even have to talk you into it. I think I have to talk you out of it, if anything.
Yeah, you might have to. We might have to have like a separate conversation about this later.
Yeah, I've warned Jonah probably 40 times to don't pick any Big Ten teams to do anything crazy, and look what he's already doing on live podcast.
Well, they're the one Big Ten team that I like.
Oh,
so
God, that means they're going to lose in the first round. You know the rules.
I'm allowed to have one.
All right. Yeah, you're right. Speak about your UNC Seton Hall matchup that you're not too happy about.
Yeah, you didn't see this as much of a problem for UNC. I think it could potentially be a problem, but that's just because I'm inordinately high on Seton Hall. I do think UNC should beat Seton Hall. They're a very deep team. They can win a whole lot of different ways. So even if Seton Hall is able to dictate the style of game they want, I think UNC will be able to compete with that as well. So I'm going to go with UNC to advance.
Yeah, I think this South region is really up for UNC's taking. I think UCLA is extremely overrated. I think Kentucky is extremely overrated. And I have 3 double-digit seeds advancing in the first round, so that really tells you what I think about the rest of the bracket.
Yeah, so do I, and I'm not one for picking many up.
Yeah.
Actually,
So I also have UNC here. Like I just said, if UNC wants to go to the Final Four, they're going to get to the Final Four in this bracket. I don't see anything giving them any trouble. They're not going to give up 105 points to Kentucky again. I can promise you that. If they even get if Kentucky even gets there. So I also have UNC.
Yeah, you can rag on Roy all you want, but he'll game plan better this time, I imagine, having seen what he saw last time.
Well, if he doesn't, his job should be up for grabs, and I may very well put my name in. So,
I mean, if you want to do that, then
I would just sabotage them for 4 years and make $20 million and lose to Duke by 40 every year. So next, I have Middle Tennessee State against Winthrop. Jonah has the same thing, which is a 12-13 matchup. There always seems to be one of these every year, so I'm pretty happy about this one, just because I like Winthrop probably the most as a 13 seed, and I definitely like Middle Tennessee State the most as a 12 seed. So I have Middle Tennessee State advancing in this game. They're a much better defensive team than people are ever going to give them credit for, and I like the way that they play. So I'm going to go with them just by a little over Winthrop. I like the experience here.
Yeah, I think Butler is a good matchup for Winthrop, and Middle Tennessee is not a good matchup for Winthrop. So I'm going to go with Middle Tennessee here. I think that they're a more complete team, even though I do like how this Winthrop team has been playing.
Yeah, an experienced Cinderella is about the most dangerous thing you could ever ask for in March.
Yep, absolutely.
So next we have Cincinnati against UCLA. This is where I hate this bracket because the only team in these last 4 teams we're about to pick that I like is Wichita State. And like I said, UCLA and Kentucky are really overrated for me. But I can't pick Cincinnati over UCLA. The star power on UCLA is too much for me. And while a lot of people would probably chalk it up to Lonzo Ball, I'm going to give it to TJ Leaf and their big guys inside, Thomas Welsh and what the heck's the other guy's name? Ike Anabogu or whatever, however the heck you say his last name.
Yeah, I'm not even that either. But.
Yeah, but those 3 guys I think are going to be too much for Gary Clark and Cincinnati inside, even though Cincinnati is definitely talented. UCLA has like 2 times as much talent.
Yeah, I mean, I think Cincinnati might be able to hold Lonzo Ball like under 10 points, which pretty much nobody's able to ever do. But they just don't have enough guys where they can guard everybody UCLA can put on the floor. So I'm going to go with UCLA in this one as well. Yeah,
and you can't speed UCLA up. You have to just play 30 seconds of good defense, and I don't think Cincinnati really wants to do that. So,
especially not for a whole game.
Right. So our next and last game of the second round is Wichita State against Kentucky.
Give me Wichita State.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the same thing here. This is honestly, this is one of the worst Kentucky teams that I can remember. Yeah, I know Malik Monk can score, and yes, I know De'Aaron Fox is a good point guard. Doesn't mean their team's very good. Isaiah Briscoe is probably the most important player on their team, and if I told you that last year, you'd tell me Kentucky wouldn't make the tournament. I bet you. So I'm going Wichita State.
If Monk goes even a little bit cold, they're in deep trouble. So
I know. I say that to people all the time. Have you ever watched a Kentucky game when Malik Monk didn't drop 40? And if their answer is no, then I know that they aren't exactly keen on what Kentucky can do. So yeah, I like.
Wichita's super deep and balanced in a way that Kentucky's not. Yeah, we both like Wichita in this one.
Yep. So that gets us to the first and second round. To be completely honest, from here on, the bracket isn't really that tough, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's like a few places where I had difficulty, but it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I had a really hard time. Like, I make a few brackets, and I had a really hard time getting different teams out of different regions. Like, I came down to Duke Villanova in the East every time. I came down to Arizona against either Gonzaga or Notre Dame in the West. UNC against whatever bombshell wants to come out of the bottom half of the South. And then I tended to go with Kansas, Louisville in the Midwest. One time I did have to throw Rhode Island in there, I'll be honest.
Yeah, the bottom of that Midwest one is where I have a lot of potential stuff. Like Rhode Island, like you do, you can talk me into Michigan pretty easily. Like, my main bracket's going to have Oregon going up against Kansas, but you could talk me out of that. So, like...
Yeah, I like Oregon, too. For me, it would be between Rhode Island, Oregon, and Louisville. And for you, I think it'd be Oregon, Michigan, Louisville, right? Or Oregon, Michigan, Rhode Island.
Yeah, or Louisville. You could talk me into any of those four teams.
Yeah. I don't think there'd be a wrong answer, really, either. I mean, all four of those teams are either red hot or just have stupid amounts of talent.
Oh, yeah, I don't think Louisville's bad. It's just like...
Yeah. So...
I just like...
Yeah. So, to end, we'll give you our Final Fours. So, mine is Duke, Arizona, Duke, Arizona, Louisville, UNC. And I have Duke over UNC part 4 in the national title game with Duke winning.
Yeah, I actually have the same Final Four as you, except I'm swapping in Kansas for Louisville. A lot of chalk for me. And my final, Arizona playing home games in Glendale, knocking off UNC in the national championship game.
Yes, something to definitely consider for your bracket if you're making it tonight. Arizona would be playing the Final Four and the national championship game in Phoenix. So
yeah,
there's a lot there. However, if you match them up against the teams that we just mentioned, they travel pretty much anywhere.
Yep, absolutely.
So that'll do it for the first and second round. We will be back next week, and I really hope that we both did pretty well.
Yeah, well, we didn't have too many differences, so...
We have the same upsets, which is good, because then we can discuss. But, yeah, best of luck. I hope you get off to a great start. Thursday is the worst day ever because it starts out with, like, the 4 or 5 most picked upset games. So people are going to be really miserable really quick, I have a feeling.
Yeah, for sure.
So we will see you back here next week. Probably, I don't know, what do you think, Monday or Tuesday?
Yeah, anytime before the Sweet 16 starts, I suppose.